世界的出路在哪里？
The global economic playing field is being leveled.
It is extremely painful.
我最担心、担忧的一件事就是未来我们什么国际系统都没有。
Yicai Global 评论员对话全球顶级战略家、经济学家，寻找下一个世界推动者。
在西方称雄世界数百年后，世界的天平是否已经转向了东方？中国的兴起是否已经不可避免？历史学家 Niall Fergusen 认为，中国已经成为了经济上的超级大国，而这对世界又意味着什么？
Niall Fergusen 是目前西方身价最高、影响最大的历史学家之一。这位英伦学者在牛津开始他的学术生涯，10年后来到美国，成为哈佛大学历史系和商学院2个学科的特聘教授。如今在斯坦福大学的胡佛研究所任研究员。他横跨历史与财经、学界与商界、大学与媒体等几个领域，同时又是高产作家，已有10几本专著问世。2004年，年仅40岁的 Ferguson 被《时代周刊》评选为全世界最有影响力的100人之一。2006年，他和另一位经济学家第一次提出了中美国一词，认为负责储蓄的中国与负责消费的美国实际上已经连为一体。
You first mentioned China America in late 2016. Since then, the world changed pretty dramatically. Do you think the prime of China America already passed?
I think, yes, it was 2006 when the word first occurred to me. Late that year, I was sitting in London with a friend, and we were trying to understand why financial markets all seemed to be rising around the world.
Sure.
And the insight was that the relationship between China and America had become so close economically that they had become one country, China-America.
Indeed, a new phenomenon has come to define the world economy. American borrowers have come to rely on Chinese savers, a symbiotic relationship between China and America that I call Chimerica.
So the financial crisis came in 2008, and I wondered if it was the end for the relationship between China and America, but it survived. And actually, Chimerica, the relationship between the two, helps explain why the crisis did not produce a Great Depression. Chinese demand, Chinese growth, Chinese credit expansion helped get the world economy back on track after 2008. So, contrary to my fears, the economic relationship between China and America is still very strong, but it has changed.
Of course it changed, because the 2008 financial crisis, actually the so-called Great Recession. How do you think the crisis changed the perception of US and China?
There has to be a shift in the global financial order. Prior to the crisis, there was no real challenge to American leadership, and the major institutions of the world economy were clearly US-led. What's fascinating about the period since the financial crisis is the way that China has created new institutions which have the potential to become an alternative set of institutions. I'm thinking of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, to name just one.
So do you also think the financial crisis is the accelerator of the trend of relative Western decline?
In some ways, I think it is true that the financial crisis has accelerated a process that I was writing about in the period before the crisis, whereby the share of the world economy that can be attributed to the West, the United States and Western Europe, continues to decline, and the share that is attributed to China and other Asian economies is growing. That is a clear sign of a great shift in the global economic balance of power,
China's Industrial Revolution is the biggest and the fastest in history. Chinese exports are in every country in the world, and Chinese companies like this one are investing literally all around the globe.
You might think the ascent of China isn't your problem. But the fact is, we're living through a massive historical shift of economic and political power from west to east. And it's going to affect all our lives.
Someone may also say the U.S. is overestimating China, and China is underestimated the U.S. Do you think it happens?
I think it's extremely important not to jump to the conclusion that the Chinese century has begun and the United States is sort of on the way out. China has many, many problems that have to be overcome. Meanwhile, the United States may look as if it is in a state of political chaos, because that is what the news media tend to cover. But let's not forget that American firms remain the dominant businesses in the world. And the US share of the world's top 500 companies has actually grown in the last 10 years.
But what do you see US future role in the world?
It all depends on what Americans themselves decide to do. The problems that the United States faces, whether you look at its public financial system or its healthcare system, are essentially political problems. They can be fixed, though it will require political will. American people are very frustrated with their political system.
That's why they elect Donald Trump.
Exactly. They elected Donald Trump because they wanted a non-politician to try to shake the system up. And he's shaking it up, but it's resistant to change. And the great ideas of the campaign turn out to be really hard to translate into reality. So ultimately, the future of the United States depends on whether or not the political system can fix itself.
加入全球经济一体化的中国，经历了人类历史上从未出现过的快速增长，使数亿人脱离贫困。中国的资本也以前所未有的规模投入欧洲、美国和非洲。中国投资美国的基金到2017年已经超过了1000亿美元。当英国的银行出现危机时，是中国的资本前来支持，而非洲、拉丁美洲和澳洲的矿产资源源源不断地涌入中国经济发展的洪流之中。一个庞大的经济强国在兴起，中国以越来越自信的姿态出现在世界舞台上，在欧美反全球化浪潮中力挺自由贸易。而美国已经从自由贸易的旗手变成了质疑者。特朗普上任伊始就取消了跨太平洋贸易协定 TPP， 并力主美国优先。在德国举行的20国峰会也承认有必要采取保护性措施以促进贸易平衡，这也是 G20 领导人自2008年首次召开大会以来第一次在自由贸易问题上做出让步。
But right now it seems US and China is pursuing very different direction in this globalization age. Like America is away from shouldering responsibilities and China towards it. Do you think it's because the two countries, US and China, are affected differently by the tide of globalization?
Globalization has been, without question, better for China than for anybody else. If you ask who have been the net beneficiaries of an era of free trade as well as relatively free capital movements, the answer is the Chinese. The United States has done well too, but not as well. So I think it's not surprising that Americans have started to question a global order which seems to benefit China more than the United States. And I think there's some reason also to ask if the United States was shouldering too many of the burdens of leadership. Much that President Trump has said, for example, about military burden sharing is quite true. The Europeans have not paid their share, and China has done relatively little for international peacekeeping. I think a more even partnership between the United States and China is highly desirable and long overdue.
But what do you think the biggest misconception of globalization?
I think the biggest misconception is an academic one. And that misconception is that we should have a world in which there is almost frictionless movement of goods, of people, and of capital. Because if you have completely unlimited free movement of goods, people, and capital, the result is a very volatile world.
中国在全球化的过程中没有大量移民涌入，中国的资本账户也并不是完全自由兑换，外国资本不能大规模突然流出。这使得中国并没有在90年代的亚洲经济危机中遭遇重创。中国的经验是在全球化的过程中应该有相应的边界以控制成本。全球化使西方面对实力日益强大的东方大国，同时也因大量穆斯林移民的涌入而面临文化上的挑战。
After half a millennium of tilting westwards, the world seems inexorably to be tilting to the east. China's poised to become the world's biggest economy.
Islam could soon overtake Christianity as mankind's favorite faith. So, does all this mean that the Western civilization itself could soon be history?
The Western world, I think, rather uncritically embraced free movement of people and free movement of capital. And now what do we find? Massive refugee crisis in Europe and money flows, hot money flows in and out of emerging markets and developed markets that are sometimes very destabilizing.
Do you think it also explains Britain's exit of EU?
I think there's no question that Brexit, the British vote to leave the European Union, was driven by similar pressures to the ones that produced Donald Trump's victory in 2016. So both Trump and Brexit were, in some measure, a backlash against globalization. It's not that people want to end it, it's just that they felt it had gone too far.
They want to change a little bit, adjust a little bit.
I would say they want to dial it down slightly. Okay. The key thing is that in the last 10 to 20 years, globalization accelerated. It became, so to speak, hyper-globalization. The migration flows, for example, into Britain increased by a factor of 10. The popular desire to dial globalization down was actually a rational one, because in some ways it had got out of control.
Yeah, of course. And now we see in Europe countries like Paris, London, and cities in Germany, the core of Western civilization is under constant terrorist attack. It seems not the Europe we know.
The effects of the migration flows shouldn't be confused with a separate process, which is the radicalization of people, mostly Muslims, born in European countries. The terrorists are not, by and large, newcomers. The terrorists tend to be the sons or grandsons of previous immigrants.
战乱和人口爆炸使大量移民从北非和中东涌入欧洲，而另一方面，在伦敦、巴黎出生的移民家庭年轻人最终加入极端组织。这两者之间的关系让欧洲的民众忧虑。90年代或较早到欧洲的少量移民，他们的子女被极端分子吸引。那么，如果现在允许大量移民涌入，怎么能避免在30到40年后更大规模的极端分子出现？
The critical point about terrorism is that it's a global phenomenon, and it is worst in majority Muslim countries, and it is up not only in those Muslim majority countries, but anywhere where there are significant Muslim populations, including the United States. But the reality is there is an ideological threat to the open society, and it is posed by Islamic extremism. And you can't just deal with violence, you also have to deal with radicalization.
而大西洋两岸的左翼精英阶层越来越倾向于代表上层精英和少数族裔弱势阶层的利益，对大多数人的利益和常识视而不见。当恐怖分子肆虐，极端的穆斯林宗教分子在巴黎、纽约、波士顿、伦敦这些文明的中心屠杀无辜民众时，希拉里和奥巴马连极端穆斯林这两个词都不愿意说出来，更不用提采取什么样的措施来阻止极端宗教思想对年轻人的煽动蛊惑。
So people are right to be concerned about this, and they're right to feel that the politicians have not come up with good answers to the problem. Combating violent extremism became a euphemism on both sides of the Atlantic for treating this as essentially a problem of law and order.
Fergusen 的第二任妻子阿丽是从索马里来到荷兰的穆斯林难民，后来在荷兰政坛极为活跃，曾当选为荷兰下院的国会议员。 也在2005年被《时代周刊》评选为影响世界100人之一，因为参与批评伊斯兰对女性压抑的电影制作，放弃伊斯兰教而面临死亡威胁，不得不生活在警察的保护之中。
So we have to, I think, recognize the danger that Muslim communities in the West are penetrated by extremists, and even if those extremists only recruit 1% of young people, that is too many. That is an unmanageable number of potential terrorists for the security forces to track. That's already true in France, it's already true in Britain. So by all means, let us have a country where any religion can be practiced, where religious tolerance is the norm. It's a central principle of Western civilization since the time of the Enlightenment. But that must be mutual tolerance. In other words, Muslim communities must be tolerant of the values of the other communities.
The West way of living, right?
Absolutely. And that fundamental issue of religious tolerance seems to me to be one that we have to insist upon. To give you an example, under Sharia law, that is correct. The penalty for leaving Islam should be death. But that is not compatible with the values of a free society. So Muslims must accept the rule of law in Britain or France is not Sharia law. It is the rule of law of those states with their historic roots in the Enlightenment and before that.
But do you think the core of Western value is threatened?
Oh, I think it is threatened. I have absolutely no doubt that it's threatened. Organizations like Islamic State explicitly threaten almost every aspect of what we think of as Western values. Now, just to be clear, Western values have changed a lot over time. It's only really in the relatively recent past that Western societies became committed to the idea of the equality of the sexes. That was certainly not a Western value in 1700 or 1800 or 1900, but it is a core Western value now.
And also that's China's value. No?
That's absolutely right. So we need to recognize that our values have evolved, but we do now have a consensus that women and men should be treated equally. If they don't accept them, if they say, no, my religion dictates a totally different reading, then we have a problem. And that seems to me a fundamental challenge to the stability of Western societies. We have to figure out a way of dealing with that doesn't jeopardize our belief in free speech. So the problems are very real. It's difficult to deal with people who are extreme in their rejection of our values if they say that they're doing it for religious reasons, because we are tolerant of religions.
二战以来，欧洲70多年的和平与繁荣正在面临着极大的挑战。而作为历史学家 Niall Fergusen 的眼光自然更为长远。在2011年出版的《文明》一书中，他将西方文明强盛500年原因归因于6大绝技：竞争、科学、法治、消费社会、工作精神和医药。而他认为西方正在慢慢失去一些让他们成功的特质。
I have boiled it down to 6 things. And I'm going to call them the 6 killer applications, the killer apps, that made the West dominate the rest. The first one was competition. Number 2 killer app is science. Democracy, medicine, consumerism, the work ethic, which you obviously all have.
Those institutions and ideas have helped hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in East Asia as well as in South Asia. China has got 5 of the killer apps for sure, but the last one, the rule of law, I think has still to be downloaded.
Like talking about one killer app, the work ethic. Like right now, European is work less than America and a lot less than Asia. So how do you think the hard working play the role in the rise of China?
The work ethic used to be something that people thought only North Europeans and North Americans had. Well, we now know that that's all absurd, and that actually no people in the world today work harder than the Chinese. Anybody who teaches at an American university will confirm that the Chinese students work harder. They work longer hours, they take their work more seriously, and in many ways...
And Chinese entrepreneurs and Chinese workers also work all very hard.
Absolutely. So this suggests that the work ethic is not culturally or racially specific, that it actually can move. Americans used to be the hard workers of the world, and now they've clearly fallen behind Asians, and Europeans have fallen behind Americans.
But I know you have very strong work ethic. So how much of your success you contribute to hard working?
Like the great economic historian David Landers at Harvard, who said to me, you know, most people work to live. We're lucky we live to work.
But you already read 14 books, and most of them very influential. What motivates you to write?
Well, there are 2 possible answers to that question, a frivolous one and a frank one. And the frivolous one goes all the way back to the great English writer Dr. Johnson, who said, a man is a blockhead who writes other than for money. And I suspect I would not have written 14 books if I had been born a wealthy man, but I was not, and I've had to pay my children's school fees and my mortgage payments out of the money I've made from writing. So that's the not serious answer. The serious answer is that I think I write books to educate myself. And I find the process of reading and thinking and translating my thoughts into words on a page the best way that I can learn about how the world works. And I have a passionate belief that if we study history hard enough, we can understand better this complex thing that is human society and the way the world works. So I suppose if I can sell my own insights to other people and pay the school fees that way, it works out pretty well. I get to educate myself and then I get to educate my children too. My great concern about the world today is that nobody leaves themselves enough time for reading, and that young people hardly read any long books, even though most of the world's knowledge is contained in quite long books.
Not in Facebook, right?
And not on Facebook, least of all on Twitter.
It seems, just now we mentioned the work ethics in China, but also right now it seems things is not only made in China, but also innovated in China. Do you think the human potential is really unlocked there?
I think a major American mistake of the last 20 or 30 years was to say, well, the Chinese may be able to make things, but they can't innovate. And that everything in the world will be like an iPhone. It might be assembled in China, but the intellectual property will be American. I think that was to underestimate China badly.
这里就是硅谷，是 Google、Facebook 和 Apple 的所在地，也是美国乃至世界发明源泉之地。长久以来，中国企业模仿这里的发明创造，在国内复制，迅速获得成功。这里有 Google， 中国就有百度；这里有 Twitter， 中国就有微博。而在 Apple 之后，中国也有了小米和华为的智能手机。然而，在全民创业的中国，创新的激情已经被点燃。中国的共享单车、移动支付、网购和高铁已经被称为新的4大发明，也领先美国进入了无现金社会。而且，中国的专利申请也在不断的刷新纪录。
In fact, in the past 15 years, the number of new patents granted to Chinese innovators has increased by a factor of 29, overtaking Britain, Russia, France, and now even Germany in the process. China has built the world's fastest passenger train, timed at 300 miles an hour. And even as the American space program gets cut back, China is expanding hers. Both are symbols of a profound shift in global power.
Do you think the arc of the world is shifting from west to east?
I've come to the conclusion that there's no such thing as an arc of history. History doesn't go in smooth lines. Actually, if you study history, it goes in quite jagged lines. And things can go very, very well and then go very, very wrong. That's the way that history works. I don't think there'll be some smooth and inexorable shift from west to east, from America to China, because I think there will be unexpected crises, disruptions and shocks, things we can't predict today, in both the West and the East. And some of the problems that we'll confront will be common problems to all of us, whether it's climate change.
But still, do you think the Western public is aware the relative decline of the West? Do you think the election of Trump to be president of the United States and Britain's exit of EU is a remedy to the relative decline of West, or is a symptom of that?
I think it was a response to a perception of decline, that voters liked the slogan "Make America Great Again" because they felt that it wasn't great anymore. In some ways, both Brexit and Trump were a response on the part of voters to a perception of Western decline and a desire to do something about that. I think it's unlikely that they will deliver much in the way of results. And then the question becomes, what next? What comes after populism? And we don't know the answer to that.